Hello and welcome to Once Upon a Time, your favorite local access television reading of stories program. We hope. That's right. I'm Catherine Poulter. I'm the children's librarian, and here is Becca Hyde.
Hello. We're glad to be back and read stories.
That's right. And so the first book that I have for you is such a beautiful one. It's called The Blue Hour. Blue is my favorite color, and this whole book celebrates that time of day between, between twilight and night when everything is blue. Mm-hmm. And here at the beginning is a color swatch of many, many, many different kinds of beautiful blues. It's written by Isabella Simler and illustrated. Here we go. The Blue Hour. The day ends. The night falls, and in between, there's the blue hour. In that moment, a blue jay raises its crest and lets out a piercing cry. A blue fox slips through the Arctic cold. Among the water lilies, blue poison dart frogs gather croaking to each other. And blue-feathered songbirds all sing in one chorus. The water's surface wriggles with frantic silver blue sardines. Vulturine guinea fowl eagerly flock together, perching on tree branches with a final metallic cry. The blue hour settles in, and nature becomes still. The wings of blue morpho butterflies sparkle against the morning glories. Forget-me-nots, bluebells, cornflowers, and violets fill the air with their fragrance. Among the branches, a blue racer snake coils itself. A bluebird's turquoise egg is cracking. A Russian blue cat vanishes. The countryside is quieting down for the night. Glass snails stretch their heads toward the sky. A blue throat, an indigo bunting, a blue-crowned pigeon, and a red-cheeked cordon bleu are silently watching each other. A huge blue whale surfaces to breathe. The blue hour is fading. And at this moment, a blue dragon crosses paths with a blue-ringed octopus. Little blue herons stand motionless. Blue monkeys go quiet. And a blue-tailed damselfly lands on a blue milk mushroom. They wait for this moment every evening, silently, and the night softly wraps them in its quiet. The end.
Oh my goodness.
I love that.
Beautiful book.
I like that too, yes.
What is it? And so many animals that are blue.
That are blue.
Realize.
I know. I want to see them all.
Here is another book that has beautiful illustrations. This book, Town is by the Sea, is written by Joanne Schwartz and illustrated by Sydney Smith. I think it's quite beautiful as well. Joanne Schwartz was born in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and Sydney Smith also lives in Nova Scotia as well. From my house, I can see the sea. It goes like this: house, road, grassy cliff, sea, and town spreads out this way and that. My father is a miner, and he works under the sea, deep down in the coal mines. When I wake, it goes like this. First I hear the seagulls, then I hear a dog barking, a car goes by on the shore road, someone slams a door and yells, "Good morning." And along the road, lupines and Queen Anne's lace rustle in the wind. First thing I see when I look out the window is the sea. And I know my father is already deep down under the sea digging for coal. When I go out in the morning, it goes like this. I run out of my house and knock at my friend's door, and we head to the old rickety playground. There are only 2 swings left now, one for big kids and one for babies. There used to be 4. One broke and the other one is wound so high around the top posts it will never come down. I don't care. I stand in the baby one and my friend swings on the big one. We go high, so high butterflies rush through my stomach. We go so high I can see far out to sea. Far out at sea, the waves have white tips. And deep down, under that sea, my father is digging for coal. When I get home, for lunch it always goes like this. My mother has a bologna sandwich on the table and a tall glass of milk. I gulp it down and eat a big pile of carrots. My mom says, "I need your help now." She sends me to the store with a list for groceries. The store is only a couple of blocks away on Main Street. The kitchen door slams on the way out. Even walking slowly, I get to the store in no time. It's so sunny today. The sea is sparkling. And deep down, under that sea, my father is digging for coal. In the afternoon, it goes like this. I go to the graveyard to visit my grandfather, my father's father. He was a miner too. The air smells like salt. I can taste it on my tongue. My grandfather used to say, "Bury me facing the sea, but I worked long and hard underground." When there are big storms here, the waves crash against the shore, battering his gravestone with salt-soaked spray. That's okay. My grandfather is used to storms. Today the sea is all calm and quiet. And deep down underneath that sea, my father is digging for coal. Right there. And there's Father. After dinner, my mother and father sit on the porch, drinking cups of tea and talking. The sun sets slowly, sinking into the sea. At nighttime, it goes like this. As I fall asleep, I can hear the whooshing back and forth of the waves. I think about the sea and I think about my father. I think about the bright days of summer and the dark tunnels underground. One day it will be my turn. I'm a miner's son. In my town, that's the way it goes. Really a haunting story.
That is. Underneath
Bit of history
the ocean
right there.
And
Above
digging
and
for
below.
coal. Yes. Thank you for reading that. The one that I have to read for us now is a Caldecott Honor book. It's called First the, and then what is this? It's an egg. First the Egg. It's by Laura Vaccaro Seeger. First the egg. Then the chicken. First the tadpole. Then the frog. First the seed. Then the flower. First the caterpillar. Then the butterfly. First the word. Then the story. First the paint. Then the picture. First the chicken. Then the egg. The end. I like that.
That's a great book. Here's another bit of history going back a few years. The Farm Summer 1942 by Donald Hall and pictures by Barry Moser. This is based on the author's past. Peter lived in San Francisco with his mom while his father was gunnery officer on a destroyer in the U.S. Navy, fighting the war far away in the South Pacific. A long blue Packard took Peter to school every morning. His mother, who taught mathematics at a university, made cocoa when Peter came home from school. They talked about the war and when Peter's father might come home on leave. In the summer of 1942, the government asked Peter's mother to spend the summer in New York working on a secret project. While his mother worked in the war effort, Peter would help his grandparents on the New Hampshire farm where his father had grown up. His mother's war work got them tickets on a huge DC-3 airliner flying from California to New York at 170 miles an hour, coast to coast, in only 16 hours. Then his mother took a streamliner with Peter from Manhattan to Boston, and they rode in a taxi across town to North Station, where a steam locomotive would carry Peter from Boston up to New Hampshire. His mother asked the conductor to let Peter know when the train stopped at Gale. The locomotive smoked and chugged north out of the city, past smaller cities, past little towns, into the open countryside. Then the train slowed down and pulled to a stop at a small wooden building with a sign that said, Gale. "Here's your stop," said the conductor to Peter. "Gale is your depot." Peter stepped down from the train to meet his grandfather. His grandfather wore overalls, a blue cap, and whispered into the ear of a white horse named Lady Ghost. Lady Ghost pulled them in the buggy all along the road past the old farmhouses to a long white house with green shutters where his grandmother waited with ginger snaps and rhubarb pie. His grandparents' kitchen had a huge black cast iron stove that burned wood. Peter had never seen such a thing before. His grandfather showed him where the bathroom was, with plumbing fixtures bought by the mill from Sears Roebuck that took the place of the outhouse they used when Peter's father was a boy. His grandmother showed him how hot water came out of the faucet from the well uphill instead of the hand pump beside the sink they used when Peter's father was a boy. Before bed, his grandfather ate milk and toast, and his grandmother sipped Moxie, which was a strange soft drink that tasted bitter. Peter didn't like it. Instead, he drank a glass of milk that his grandfather brought down from the barn. His grandfather told him that this milk was fresh, warm from the cow, real milk, not pasteurized. It didn't taste like San Francisco milk. That night, Peter slept in the feather bed that his father slept in when he was a boy, under a patchwork quilt made by his great-grandmother. His grandmother told him, out of scraps from his great-great-grandmother's dresses, with a hot water bottle, because it was cold for June. Farm's waking up. In the morning, his grandfather introduced him to Bertha, Sally, Dottie, Lucy, Drusilla, and Mary Beth. While he milked in the tie-up, his grandfather told Peter stories about long ago, before cars and airplanes. He recited a poem about a man who jumped and ran away when he saw his first railway train. His grandmother introduced Peter to the chickens. When his grandmother stuck her hand under a hen, the hen flew up in the air, squawking and squawking and squawking, and Peter jumped like the man afraid of the trains, until he saw his grandmother smiling with an egg in her hand. The next day, his grandfather took him to fetch a load of hay in the hay rack. After his grandfather pitchforked hay into the hay rack, he showed Peter how to rake up loose strands with the bull rake, the way Peter's father used to. He showed Peter how to feed Lady Ghost a lump of sugar. On the way back, they needed to cross the railroad track, and they waited and waited while a long freight train pulled past them. Peter's grandfather counted 97 cars, taking airplane fuselages and searchlights up to Montreal for shipping to England. When his grandfather asked Peter how he liked haying, Peter said he liked it, but the hay dust made his head itch. His grandmother found Peter a straw hat hanging on a peg in the tool shed that Peter's father wore when he raked after. His grandfather said that when he wore his straw hat, Peter looked just like his father. That night, they drank milk and Moxie and ate milk toast and listened to Gabriel Heater on the big radio near the wood stove. Gabriel Heater's deep voice told about air raids in Europe and fighting in New Guinea. Peter wore his straw hat while he sat listening. Peter missed his father. Peter missed his mother, and he missed his friends in San Francisco, but he loved his grandmother's ginger snaps and grandfather's stories, and he loved the railroad 12 trains a day. The next day, they brought salt for the sheep to lick. The day after, Peter's grandfather needed to go to Andover, 4 miles away, to talk to a man about selling some timber. They backed Lady Ghost into the carriage and started off. When they drove through a covered bridge, Peter's grandfather told him how in winter the town shoveled snow right onto the bridge so that sleighs could slide through it. Halfway to Andover, they stopped at a farm so that Peter could play with Emily, who was his age, and the only other 9-year-old for miles around. Emily showed Peter her dollhouse. Peter was polite. He liked the tiny furniture. Then in Emily's room, he found a rubber ball. Emily was polite. They threw it back and forth until Peter's grandfather and Lady Ghost came to pick him up. On the way back, Grandfather showed him the graveyard where Peter's great-great-great-grandfather was buried, who fought in the American Revolution against the King of England. They stopped at Paul Pillsbury's post office and store. Paul thought Peter had grown a whole inch since the night he stepped off the train. His grandfather bought Peter 2 chocolate-covered cherries for 1 penny. Sundays at church, he saw his cousins, Edna, Martha, Lucille, Charlie, Clarence, and Audrey, who were big girls and boys, and his cousins, Maybelle, Josie, Forrest, and Grant, who were grown-ups. Sunday nights, they hitched Lady Ghost to the buggy again and went back to church for a Christian endeavor, which is what they called it when the young people sang hymns. Peter found "Life is like a mountain railroad" in the hymn book. Because Peter loved railroads, every week the young people sang, "Life is like a mountain railroad." Over the 4th of July weekend, his mother took the train up from Manhattan. When his mother stepped off the train at the depot, Peter was rubbing Lady Ghost's ears. His mother hugged him. She kept saying how tall he was. She liked the way Peter looked wearing his father's straw hat. Peter introduced her to the cows, the chickens, and the sheep. He showed her how to feed Lady Ghost a lump of sugar. Some days they didn't hay because it was the Sabbath, and Peter's grandmother served cold food because it was wrong to cook on the Sabbath, and old friends came calling in the afternoon. Peter listened to stories about the blizzard of '88 when his grandfather was a boy. Uncle Gene told how they rolled the snow after that blizzard with an ox pulling the snow roller that smoothed the snow for sleighs to slide over. But their ox got his foot stuck in something, and it was the chimney of a house. Peter saw his grandfather grinning, and Peter laughed. For weeks it didn't rain, and that was good because the hay never spoiled, and they could hay every day except Sunday. Then it was dry, and the hay turned brown, and they hauled water to the beans and corn and squash in the garden. The hay rack's wooden wheels were so dry they shrank, and the iron rims rattled. One day, when they were rolling downhill with the hay rack full, a rim worked loose, and it rolled right past Lady Ghost. The next morning, Peter and his grandfather led Lady Ghost, pulling the hay rack into the creek to swell the wood inside the iron rims. Then it rained 4 days in August, and they stayed inside because they couldn't hay in the rain. But the new grass coming up where they had already cut the hay turned bright green. While it rained, Peter's grandfather sat on the chopping block in the woodshed, whittling new teeth for the bull rake. When it rained, Peter found a sack of books in the attic that had been his father's when he was a boy. Peter read Tom Swift and his Flying Machine. What would Tom Swift have thought of a DC-3? When they went back to haying, it was cool, and maple branches started to turn red. Peter didn't want the New Hampshire summer to end. He didn't want to stop feeding chickens and salting sheep. He liked stories and ginger snaps. He didn't want to leave Lady Ghost and go home to San Francisco, but also he wanted to fly on a DC-3 again and go home to San Francisco and live with his mother again and ride to school in a blue Packard and tell his friends about haying with Lady Ghost and about a wood stove and a Sears Roebuck bathroom and cows and sheep and chickens, and maybe his father would come home on leave from the Navy. Gabriel Heater told them about American troops invading a Pacific island called Guadalcanal with the support of the gallant boys of the United States Navy. Peter was proud of his father on a destroyer in the Pacific. Peter wanted the war to be over. The day before Peter took the train back to Boston, he fed the chicks, grown into pullets and almost hens. He helped his grandfather hay. He listened to his grandfather's stories, milking the cows in the tie-up, and watched his grandmother make baked beans and brown bread for supper with string bean salad and fresh corn. Peter began to wonder if his grandmother and grandfather might surprise him with ice cream for dessert when he heard a carriage pull into the dooryard and a Model A and an old Chevy truck. It was Martha and Charlie and Edna and Clarence and Audrey and Lucille from church, and Emily too, with her older brother, Sam, on leave from the Marines. They brought ice cream that Edna and Clarence had cranked themselves, and a cake that said, "Goodbye, Peter, come back," and a patchwork quilt to take back to San Francisco to remember New Hampshire by. Then Edna led everybody singing, "Life is like a mountain railroad." Peter said goodbye to Bertha, Sally, Dottie, Lucy, Drusilla, and Mary Beth, and the chickens, and the hens, and the sheep, and his grandmother, and his grandfather, and Lady Ghost, and hung his straw hat on its peg in the tool shed. The DC-3 flying home at 170 miles an hour, Peter's mother told him there that his father would come home soon, for a whole week before going back to his destroyer. Peter was happy going home. Peter was also sad, missing Lady Ghost and thinking of his straw hat on its peg. Then his mother told him that probably next summer they would ask her back to New York. Would he like to feed Lady Ghost more lumps of sugar? Peter was excited, driving home from the airport in a taxi, through traffic, uphill to their house. And then the door opened, and there is Dad.
That was beautiful. Makes me want to go back in time.
Me too.
Thank you.
To New Hampshire.
Now, I brought one that everybody knows the story of. This is Hansel and Gretel, but the words in this retelling are by Cynthia Ryland, and she's one of my favorite authors. And the pictures are by Jen Corazza. Hansel and Gretel. It has been said that guardian spirits watch over and protect small children, and that may be so. But there are also stories of children who find the courage to protect themselves. Such is the story of Hansel and Gretel. Inside a stone cottage in a green forest, a young brother and young sister, Hansel and Gretel, lived with their father and their stepmother. Their real mother had died. The family was very poor, for the father had been ill and unable to work for their bread. They were down to their last loaf. The new wife was very bitter about this. She had expected to be taken care of, and now here she was, nearly starving. She decided to blame the children. She said to her husband late one night, "We cannot feed ourselves and feed your children at the same time. Because of them we are starving. Your children eat too much anyway. We must be rid of them." The father was distressed. "They mean no harm," he said. "They're but children." "Children or not, they're eating our bread," said the wife. "They have to go." There are many forms of wickedness in the world. Sometimes it is easy to recognize who is evil. Sometimes it is not easy at all. Wickedness can wear a smile, just as goodness can. Hansel and Gretel would soon learn this the hard way. Late the next evening, the children could not sleep, and they overheard their stepmother plotting to be rid of them. "We will take them deep into the forest and leave them there," the stepmother said. "They will never find their way back home, and what is ours will be ours alone." The father was a weak man. He had been so sad since the children's mother had died that all his courage was gone. He agreed to do what his selfish wife told him to do, for he had no fight left in him. In her little bed, Gretel began to cry softly. "Oh, brother," she whispered to Hansel, "we are to die." Hansel, however, was not afraid. He possessed the courage his father lacked, and do whatever was necessary to protect his sister. "Don't worry, Gretel," whispered Hansel. "You will not die. Trust me." When Gretel had finally cried herself to sleep, and the house was still, Hansel crept outside under the light of a full moon. He filled his pockets with small white pebbles from a pathway near the door. The next day the children's father and stepmother dressed the children for a walk. "We will go together into the forest and find some flowers," the stepmother said with a smile. As they went farther and farther away from their cottage, every so often Hansel bent down as though to look at a leaf. What he was really doing, however, was dropping a small white pebble. When finally they reached the deep part of the forest, the father and stepmother told the children to wait under a tree for them. "We will find good berries for you to eat," said the stepmother with a smile. The children waited all night. By morning, they were waiting still. "It's time to go home," said Hansel, and they followed the trail of small white pebbles all the way back home. Their father was happy to see them. Their stepmother pretended to be. That night, the children again overheard their stepmother plotting to be rid of them. "Tomorrow we will take them so deep into the forest they will never come home again," she said. And again Hansel waited until everyone was sleeping, so he might gather the small white pebbles that would lead them home. But this night the door had been barred, and Hansel could not get out, so he carefully cut away a piece of the last loaf of bread and put it in his pocket. The next day the children were again dressed to go into the forest. "We will look at the birds," said the stepmother with a smile. As they walked deeper and deeper into the dark forest, Hansel stopped now and then as though inspecting closely some small thing. In fact, he was dropping crumbs of bread from his pocket. The father and the stepmother again told the children to wait under a tree, promising this time certainly to return with berries. The children waited all night. By morning, they were waiting still. "It is time to go home," said Hansel. But a most terrible thing had happened. As the children slept, the little mice of the forest had eaten every crumb of bread Hansel had dropped. The children were now completely alone, completely lost. Gretel began to cry softly. "We will be all right, Gretel," said Hansel. "Take courage." They began to walk, hoping to find help. After some time, and suffering so with hunger, the children came upon a little white house in the forest, surrounded by beautiful flowers. It was so pretty. It looked good enough to eat. There it is. In fact, it was good enough to eat. The children discovered that the house was made of cake and sugar, and they set right to nibbling on it. Hansel pulled off a bit of shutter and put it in his mouth, and Gretel tasted the window boxes. Suddenly, a voice called from within the house, "Children dear, children fair, I love children everywhere." And the door opened, and there stood an old woman, wearing a smile. She welcomed Hansel and Gretel into her home, and she fed them warm food and put them to bed under an eiderdown. The children were so very grateful. But once they were asleep, the old woman picked them up and put them in cages behind the house. When Hansel and Gretel awoke in the morning and realized what had happened, they knew that the old woman was actually a witch. Her smile was gone. The witch liked to eat little children, but she liked them plump and juicy, and Hansel and Gretel were much too thin. She would first have to fatten them up. She made Gretel help her with the cooking and left Hansel in his cage. She planned to eat Hansel first. Each day the witch checked on his plumpness. "Stick out your finger so I may see how fat you are," the witch told Hansel. Hansel was not only a brave child, he was a smart child. He had noticed the witch's failing eyesight, so each day, instead of putting his finger between the bars of the cage, he stuck out a chicken bone. "Too skinny," shouted the witch, and she ordered Gretel to cook more food. This went on for many days, and for many days the witch thought Hansel had not gotten any plumper. The witch finally exploded with impatience. "Then I'll eat him anyway," she screamed at Gretel, "and then I'll eat you too." The witch ordered Gretel to build a fire in the great stone oven, crying softly. Gretel did as she was told, but as she worked she remembered what her brother Hansel had always told her. "Take courage, Gretel." Gretel made the fire hot and roaring. When the fire was hot enough for roasting, the witch said, "Crawl in, little girl. See if the oven is ready." The witch was now secretly planning to roast Gretel first, since Gretel herself had plumped up nicely. Once the girl was inside the oven, the witch was going to shut the door. Gretel, however, happened to be as smart as her brother. She looked at the open oven. "I'm not sure I can get in," Gretel said. "I believe it's too small for anyone to fit in there." "Silly goose," said the witch, "it's big enough. Look, even I can fit in." And the witch thrust her head inside the oven door. In that instant, Gretel, strong from all her hard work, pushed with all her might and pushed that witch right into the oven. The little girl slammed the iron door shut. "We are saved!" Gretel shouted, and she ran to release her brother. They cried happy tears for being alive. Then the children filled their pockets with bits of food and some pieces of gold from the witch's treasure box and set out to somehow find their way back home. Perhaps this is when the guardian spirits finally intervened, when small children have already been so brave. For when Hansel and Gretel came to a river, a large white swan was waiting there for them. They crossed the river on its back, and when they were again on land, they knew they were close to home. Running as fast as they could, they called out for their father, who heard them and came running towards them. He picked them up in his arms and held them and cried 1,000 tears for their safe return. The children's stepmother had died from eating a poisonous mushroom. And finally released from her spell, their father too had nearly died from the shame of having abandoned his children. But now joy and forgiveness were everywhere. The family had enough pieces of gold to buy 500 loaves of bread. They would have enough food for the remainder of their days. Love would take care of the rest. The end.
Courageous children. Hooray
Yes.
for them.
Hooray for them.
I am now going to read Jabari Jumps by Gaia Cornwall. It is the book of the month at Marshall Library for Storytime during the month of July. And there's a bit of courage happening in this book too, which I hope you enjoy. Jabari Jumps. "I'm jumping off the diving board today," Jabari told his dad. "Really?" said his dad. The diving board was high and maybe a little scary, but Jabari had finished his swimming lessons and passed his swim test, and now he was ready to jump. "I'm a great jumper," said Jabari, "so I'm not scared at all." At the pool, Jabari watched the other kids climb the long ladder. They walked all the way out to the end of the board, as big as tiny bugs. Then they stood on the edge. They spread their arms and bent their knees and sprang up, up, up. And then they dove down, down, down. Splash! "Looks easy," Jabari said. But when his dad squeezed his hand, Jabari squeezed back. Jabari looked up at the bottom of the ladder. He looked all the way up. "You can go before me if you want," he told the kid behind him. "I just need to think about what kind of special jump I'm going to do." Jabari thought and thought. Jabari started to climb, up and up. "This ladder is very tall," he thought. "Are you okay?" called his dad. "I'm just a little tired," said Jabari. "Maybe you should climb down and take a tiny rest," said his dad. A tiny rest sounded like a good idea. When he got to the bottom, Jabari remembered something. "I forgot to do my stretches," he said to his dad. "Stretching is very important," said his dad. "I think tomorrow might be a better day for jumping," Jabari said. They looked up at the diving board together. "You know, it's okay to feel a little scared," said his dad. "Sometimes, if I feel a little scared, I take a deep breath and tell myself I am ready. And you know what? Sometimes it stops feeling scary and feels a little like a surprise." Jabari loved surprises. Jabari took a deep breath and felt it fill his body from the ends of his hair right down to the tips of his toes. Jabari looked up. He began to climb, up and up and up and up, until he got to the top. Jabari stood straight up. He walked all the way to the end of the board. His toes curled around the rough edge. Jabari looked out as far as he could see. He felt like he was ready. "I love surprises," he whispered. He took a deep breath and spread his arms and bent his knees. And then he sprang up off the board, flying. Jabari hit the water with a splash. Down, down, down he went. And then back up. Whoosh! Jabari, you did it, cried his dad. I did it, said Jabari. I'm a great jumper. And you know what? What? Said his dad. Surprise! Double backflip is next. The end.
Oh, that's great. I like that. So when I have something that's kind of scary, I will think about it maybe being a surprise.
A surprise.
Very nice. Now, this one is a nice
Oh.
story I discovered. It's called Captain Snap and the Children of Vinegar Lane by Ronnie Shooter. Captain Snap and the Children of Vinegar Lane. Nobody liked to go to the end of Vinegar Lane. Captain Snap lived there and everyone was afraid of him. He was thin and mean and bent and bitter. His skin was as cracked and old as dry and dry as a slice of stale bread. People said Captain Snap lived like a rat under a pile of old junk. Otto Phelps said his roof was only a piece of rusty tin. His walls were rotten bits of board nailed together. Panina Boyle said his chimney was nothing but a crooked stack of hollowed-out tin cans. Once in a while, on days when they felt especially twitchy and wiggly, the children of Vinegar Lane would pinch each other and run up the street to spy on Captain Snap. The bravest of the group was also the littlest. Her name was Emily Ann Crocker, but everyone called her Sody. "Go ahead, Sody, say something," the big kids would whisper, and little Sody would pop her head out from behind the grill of a rusty radiator and yell, come out, Captain Snap!" And Captain Snap would come bumping, knocking, and crashing out of his house, scattering boxes and boards and bits of broken bottles in front of him. "How are you doing today, Captain Snap?" Sody would ask, her hands on her knees to keep them from knocking. And no matter what the day, no matter what the hour, Captain Snap always did the same odd thing. He'd stamp his foot, snap his fingers, and pull his lip out so far that when he let go of it, it snapped back against his face with a plap, like the sound of rainwater hitting an empty bucket. And Sody would grab Mo, and Mo would grab Myrna, and Myrna would grab Maxie, and Maxie would grab Curly, and Curly would grab anyone at all. He would just bolt down Vinegar Lane with Mo and Myrna and Maxie and Sody racing and stumbling through and tripping to keep up with him. "Weren't scared at all, were you?" Curly would ask when they were safely at the other end of Vinegar Lane. "Not a bit," the others would answer, all except Sody, who'd squint her eyes till they looked like tiny brown raisins and gaze at the sky like she was thinking big thoughts. One gray day when the killing frost had just come and turned the leaves on Vinegar Lane to mahogany and gold, the children of Vinegar Lane pinched each other, put on their mittens, and ran off once again to spy on Captain Snap. Come out, Captain Snap," Sody called from behind a broken washing machine. But this time, no one came. "Call him again," Curly Jess whispered, louder. "Hey, Captain Snap, you in there?" Sody yelled. Still no answer, only a sound like quiet sighing. Was it the wind? "Where do you think he is?" Maxie asked. Sody squinted up her eyes and gazed at the sky. "Inside," she announced with certainty. "Follow me." And Sody advanced towards Captain Snap's house with Myrna, Mo, and Maxie following behind her, and Curly Jess bringing up the rear. At the side of the house was a filthy window made from a porthole of an old ship. Sody wiped the dirt away with the sleeve of her jacket and peered inside. "Look," she whispered, and everyone crowded around. Through the grimy glass, they could see a room full of junk and Captain Snap lying like a pat of melted butter, droopy and yellow, on a stack of old brown mattresses. "He's dead," Myrna whispered, shaking her head slowly. "No way," Sody said. "Look at his breath." Sure enough, a small puff of steamy gray smoke hung in the cold air just above Captain Snap's mouth. "He's alive," Curly Jess announced, "but sick, real sick." "And freezing," Mo added. "Look at his legs. They've got bumps on them like a raw chicken." "No choice," Curly Jess said. "We gotta help." Everyone nodded and turned to Sody. "No choice," she said. "Come on." And late that afternoon, while a passing squall spit the first layer of snow dust on Vinegar Lane, the children of Vinegar Lane loaded Sody's red wagon with blankets and a pot of Sody's mother's homemade stew and took turns pulling it up Vinegar Lane to Captain Snap's house. "Follow me," Sody said when they got there. She lifted the heavy stew pot and took many tiny quick steps toward Captain Snap's door. Behind her, Mo, Myrna, and Maxie tiptoed, each carrying a blanket, with Curly Jess hugging a red one and moving steadily in the opposite direction. "Oh, be the lookout," Curly Jess clattered. "Oh, watch from the window." Sody set the stew pot down in front of Captain Snap's door. Tap, 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 she knocked. But no one answered. Rap, rap, she knocked again louder. "Captain Snap," she called out. Crash! Something fell inside. "Look out!" Curly Jess cried. "Watch it! Here he comes!" And from the other side of the door, they heard Captain Snap's sick voice creaking like the hinge on a rusty gate. "Go away, scat! Begone with you!" The children of Vinegar Lane didn't wait to hear any more. They just dropped their blankets and tore down Vinegar Lane, with Curly Jess's back in the lead. Only Sody paused to look back. So only she saw two bony hands lift the stew pot into the dark interior of Captain Snap's house. "It'll be a cold day in July before I go back there," Myrna swore. "Same here," everyone agreed. But 1 week later, when the sky was as blue as a flower, they were back once again at Captain Snap's window. "He's gone!" Curly Jess shouted. "This time I bet he's really Sody didn't stop to listen. She ran to Captain Snap's door with the big kids at her heels and was just lifting her fist to knock when, all on its own, the door swung open. "Oh, what do we do now?" Curly Jess asked. "We go in," Sody announced. She took an extra gulp of air and grabbed Mo and the others. Altogether, they pushed and squeezed their way through Captain Snap's door. And then something fluttered. Someone muttered, something rumbled, something tumbled, and from high up in the ceiling, a long metal arm made of junk from Captain Snap's yard clanked and clattered and reached down, holding a sign in its clamp-like hand. In big black letters it said, "Ahoy!" The children of Vinegar Lane dared to look around the room, and everywhere they looked, they saw things that were really other things. A giraffe with a long neck that was really a broken umbrella, turned inside out. The skeleton of a small dinosaur that was really chicken bones strung together. A carousel made from an old record player, and a circle of cardboard. A flower that was really buttons and wire, and most amazing of all, the machine made from the parts of other machines that had opened the door and shown them the sign. And then, stepping out from behind the open door, Captain Snap appeared, pale as paper, wrapped in one of their blankets. The children of Vinegar Lane looked at Captain Snap, and Captain Snap looked at them. For a long time no one said a word. Then Captain Snap removed his hand from under the blanket and pulled his lip out so far that when he let go of it, it snapped back against his face with a plap. "Thanks," he said softly. "Thanks." The word sounded squashed and new as if he'd never said it out loud before. And sad to tell, the children of Vinegar Lane forgot their manners. They didn't say, "You're welcome," or "It was nothing," or even, "Uh-huh." They just stood still, their eyes growing wider and wider as they continued to gaze around the room. "Did you make all of this?" Curly Jess asked. Captain Snap nodded and lay aside his blanket. "Long ago," he mumbled, "I sailed 6 of the 7 seas. The days were long and the nights even longer. While the others sang songs and longed for land, I turned bits of scrap into sailor's fancy." He pulled a hanger, some string, an old rag, and some antenna wire out of a big pile of junk near his feet. With fast-flying fingers, he yanked and twisted, hammered and pulled, and before very long, he had made a tiny puppet that could dance on a string. "For you," he said simply, and handed the puppet to Jess. "Thanks," Curly Jess said, so surprised that he remembered his manners. Captain Snap said nothing. He just winked and muttered and sat down again by his junk pile. The sky had turned purple and the moon had begun to rise when Captain Snap finished his work and gave Sody, Myrna, Maxie, and Mo each a special gift. Out of nothing, much he made, all manner of magic. And from that day forth, Captain Snap became known as Captain Scrap, the artist of Vinegar Lane, and every day the children of Vinegar Lane and even their parents listened to his salty stories, helped him work, and became his very good friends. And if ever you're in the neighborhood, be sure to climb the hill and stop at the home of the famous artist, Captain Scrap, for there you will see something very special. And look at that. The end.
I like that.
I did too.
Here is a true story about Caroline Herschel, and this is called Caroline's Comets. It's written and illustrated both by Emily Arnold McCulley, and I think there's a lot to be learned in this book. Caroline's Comets. Caroline Herschel's father was the first to show her the stars. Caroline wrote about it in her autobiography. "I remember his taking me on a clear frosty night into the street to make me acquainted with several of the most beautiful constellations, after we had been gazing at a comet which was visible." By the time, let's see, make sure I didn't miss a page. There. Caroline was born in 1750 in Hanover. Though the people in Hanover spoke German, the region was then ruled by the King of England. Caroline's father and brothers were all royal musicians, but her mother thought girls should be taught more practical skills, so Caroline learned to knit. From that day forward, I was fully employed in providing my brothers with stockings. She was also the family scullery maid. Caroline caught typhus when she was 10, and when she recovered, she got smallpox. The first stunted her growth, and the second scarred her face. Her father worried that no man would marry her. How would she live without a husband to support her? Of all her siblings, Caroline loved William the most. The 7 Years' War was raging, and William would be called to fight. To avoid it, he left for England to make a living conducting a chorus and giving piano lessons. Caroline longed for him. In short, there was no one who cared much about me. By the time Caroline was 22 years old, it seemed nothing good would ever happen. Out of the blue, William invited her to England, where he had become a successful musician. He would teach Caroline to sing so she could perform with his chorus and earn her own living. After William paid for a maid to replace Caroline, her family grudgingly let her go. William came to fetch her. Before she left, she knitted enough stockings to last her family for 2 years. The journey by coach, ferry, and packet boat took 12 days. In Bath, Caroline settled into her new life, struggling along with the English language and customs. William coached her, and before long, Caroline became a popular soprano. By way of relaxation, we talked of astronomy and the bright constellations with which I had made an acquaintance during the fine nights I spent traveling. William wondered what lay beyond the Earth's solar system. Was there life on other planets, or stars, or the moon? To find the answers, William read about how to build a telescope. Their whole house became a workshop. Caroline was assisting, and it was fascinating. William first tried to make his telescope with a glass lens, but it was impossible to make a lens that big. So he made his telescope with a mirror instead of a lens. At that time, mirrors were made out of metal. William built a furnace to melt the tin and the brass for the mirror. After the mirror was fired, it had to be polished to make it concave. William couldn't pause even for a minute of the mirror, or the mirror would mist and be ruined. While William doggedly polished, sometimes for 16 hours straight, Caroline took care of William's needs. I was constantly obliged to feed him by putting victuals into his mouth, and she read to him too. Their first telescope was 5 feet long, with a 6-inch mirror that magnified 6,000 times. They discovered that the great blurry disk of the light, called the Milky Way, was made of millions of stars. On March 13, 1781, William saw something new. It might be a planet, but no new planet had been discovered for thousands of years. It was a planet. Word of the planet Uranus circulated around the world and made William famous. It started a rage for astronomy too. An excited King George and his family visited the Herschels and ordered 4 telescopes from William. William needed Caroline's help more than ever now that he began making more and more telescopes. He made a 20-foot telescope, and William had to perch high on the air of the rickety scaffolding, often in the strong winds. Once, as he was climbing down, the whole apparatus collapsed, and William was nearly crushed. Another time, Caroline ran in the snow and slipped and fell. And one time, she injured her leg. She continued, though, to work on their star catalog while her wound healed. William made a small telescope for Caroline. He taught her math, and so she could calculate the positions of stars. In 1738, Caroline discovered 14 previously unknown nebula and star clusters and 2 new galaxies. And all this time, she also did needlework and sewing and kept William's accounts and cleaned all the equipment. In 1786, William went to visit astronomers around Europe. Left by herself, Caroline promptly discovered a comet. It was called the Ladies' Comet, and it made Caroline famous. She was the second Herschel to amaze the world. Caroline's celebrity spread even farther and caused a worldwide enthusiasm for comets. And though William no longer needed Caroline to be his housekeeper, William offered to pay her as his assistant. And Caroline Herschel has become known ever since as the hunter of comets. The end.
Very nice. Thank you. And we are at the end. Bye-bye.